Welcome to Athletes to Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm your host, Rob Finkelstein, CEO and founder of Alumni Direct. We've created a platform to help alumni across all sets of whether it's college alumni, whether it's business alumni associations, fraternities, sororities, and athletes, just a platform where they can network and connect through their affinity relationships. And this show has been designed to teach and inspire athletes that there is life after sports. So we talk to different athletes and coaches, and athlete transition out of sport is a major issue. And today we're really excited to have Keith Sconiers on with us. And Keith, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So his background, he's a former college basketball player at Portland State. And then he kind of got into the world that I'm in a little bit here. He's a podcaster. And more importantly, he's an entrepreneur and a speaker. And his passion is about helping people. And that's what, again, what this show is all about. So first question I always ask is, talk a little bit about growing up playing sports and how that shaped your life leading into college.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Fresno, California. My mom and dad never got married, so mom was a single mom up until the point that she met my stepdad, who was a former almost professional athlete that would have played for the Raiders had it not been for some issues that he had with a knee going out. And so while I lived with my mom and my stepdad, really wasn't that interested in sports. So I stayed as far away from it as possible because my stepdad was into it. And so the dynamics that happened between, step parents and things like that, which I don't call my step parent today, he's my dad.
Yeah.
But back then he was definitely the step parent, right? It's like, you're not my dad. So I didn't really start playing basketball till I was a sophomore in high school,
Wow.
because my older brother and I, eventually custody was given to my biological dad, and we lived with our grandmother in high school. And so in high school was really where I had the opportunity to start playing sports. But I was a sophomore in high school when I started playing, and um, yeah, that's when I got started. And then played for 2.5 years, 3 years in high school. Went off to a JUCO, and then got a scholarship to go to Portland State.
That's great. And it's amazing.
Yeah,
You hear stories. I mean, it's kind of like Michael Jordan, not making a
yeah,
student, until like later in his high school. So when you're growing up, again, you started late, but did you have a dream
yeah.
to be a professional athlete?
To be honest with you, I had no idea even what a Division 1 scholarship was. When the basketball coach approached me on campus, he said, "Kid, you could be a Division 1 athlete." I didn't know what basketball was. I didn't know what Division 1 I didn't know what a scholarship was. All I knew was that they were going to Hawaii, and I wanted to go to Hawaii too. And so, it all happened so fast that, of course, I think in my heart I felt like I could have been a professional athlete and play in the NBA, or overseas or something of that nature. But there wasn't a specificity to the goal, right? It was, man, I want to get as good as I possibly can. I want to reach my potential. I want to compete. And I found myself competing against a lot of great players that did eventually go on to those next levels. But I could say that I wanted to be a professional athlete, but there wasn't specificity around like how specifically I was going to get there and what it was going to look like. Right.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think probably part of it too, I guess, would be, based on when you started playing. I mean, a lot of
Hmm.
people, we talked a little bit, we're talking off air here, but just in youth sports, I mean, people that are starting now, I coached for many years, and,
Hmm.
these kids are starting at 5 years old. And then when you get into all the travel sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, football, lacrosse, soccer,
Hmm.
there's a lot of dedication to it. And it seems like, most of them get burned out towards the end of
Mhm,
high school, but I think all of them, when they start that young, probably have more of that dream to get there.
mhm, 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 mhm.
So, talking about kind of personality wise, being an athlete, do you think, or the perseverance and playing and the practices, did you see that have any effect on shaping, how you went about things?
What about things as it relates to the sport itself,
More,
or
yeah, or the sport itself, life in general.
yeah, so life in general? Absolutely. I would say that the thing that really shaped who I was and really who I am as a person today really had to do with the relationship I had with my high school coach, the one that got me started playing ball. Right. So prior to him meeting me, I'd been expelled 6 times before I got to high school. My freshman year in high school, I had a 1.3 GPA, had already been kicked off campus. I was going down the wrong road. And one day we sat in the car after, you know, uh, he had set us up with a booster. I don't know if I can say this, but he set us up with a booster to basically put up some Christmas lights on a house so that we could earn some funds so that we could go to on a
Right.
trip, me and another teammate. And he's gonna give me a ride home. So he's giving me a ride home. We stop at the stoplight, and he just in very specific language said, "Hey, if you're not gonna treat this serious, I'm really not gonna mess with you." It was at that point that I realized that if I didn't get my act straight, then I wasn't gonna have an opportunity.
Right.
And ever since then, I've tended to treat every single opportunity that I have access to with a certain level of professionalism and tenacity that it takes to see the job through. And so I wouldn't say that it was necessarily the game, it was more of the expectations of what life or how you should approach life that was shaped by that coach that really had an impact on how I approached life, the sport, and everything that I attempt to do today.
That's great. And the coaches have so much of an impact. I was talking to somebody on another podcast, and we're just talking about that. And like I had one thing that resonated with me when I was coaching travel baseball. When I first started, there was I guess kind of like the senior guy that, the mentor, so to speak, who'd
Mm,
been doing travel baseball for a long time. And
mhm,
one thing that always stuck with me is he said that the relationship that he had with his boys, the kids that he coached, that he went to their weddings and stuff like that,
mhm,
and that kind
mhm,
of resonated. And kind of what you're saying here is just that impact that your coach had in your life. That's great. That
mhm.
really is.
Yeah, yeah. Every time I see him, I tell him he saved my life because I really believe he did.
That's great. Well, shout out to him for sure.
Yeah,
So now getting into college, one of the things that we talk about, there's a athlete transition out of sports is a
yeah.
major issue. Obviously, I mean, there's mental
Mhm,
health issues, there's financial literacy, a lot of things going on with that.
mhm.
When you were at school playing, did was there any kind of programs that the school did back then for kind of teaching athletes about life after sports?
No, no, there wasn't. No, there wasn't one class. There wasn't a speaker that I recall ever talking about it. It just kind of hit me when the time came.
And that's rough. And I mean, a lot of and I know it's, do you have any I guess as far as what your school is doing today, are they doing any better with that? 'Cause, I mean, some schools are into it, some aren't.
You know, I know for sure that this my alma mater is doing some things in regards to NIL in terms of creating support systems for athletes, which I'm really excited about. I'm glad that they're doing that, but I don't know much more
Right.
as it relates to what they're doing. But I do know that there's a huge need for it because I was very responsible. So I went to class. I created my own, class, schedule and things of that nature, and really followed through on my education while I was on campus. And I still had no clue what to expect as it related to the transition.
Yeah, and that's hard. I think it's important, and I know you and I have talked about it a little bit, and something Alumni Direct's doing is we do want to kind of roll up the sleeves and get into some of these schools and help them to create curriculum, because it's not only the current athletes, but the alumni athletes that are out there as well, that like you're saying, that didn't have that. And I think people they're so wrapped up in their sport, obviously, with the practicing and the playing, that they don't get to enjoy some of the benefits per se, maybe that other students might have, because they are able to do the internships and things like that. So I agree. There's definitely a need for it. So you hit on the topic that I always like to talk about. Give me your thoughts on NIL and what name, image, likeness for people out there.
Man, I think it's a great opportunity. I think if you're an athlete that's a creator that can create followership and create a personal brand for yourself, and you can leverage that into opportunities, not only for yourself, but for the community that you care about making an impact on, I think that it's fantastic. I think it's great. I don't think that it's a silver bullet that's going to solve issues per se for athletes because we still have professional athletes that make millions of dollars that
Right.
have difficulty transitioning. And so I think, if it's not properly handled as it relates to, maybe like a holistic offering to help a athlete really develop, like as a person and as a professional, then I think that, it could exacerbate the issue when it comes to transition because now how are you going to handle, not having the attention from organizations if you haven't done a good job of creating a personal brand that
Right.
can that is beyond just who you are as as an athlete. right? If you lose your voice, after you're done playing the sport and you're no longer, a great, partner for these brands, like now how are you going to handle that,
Right.
right? And so I think it's a great opportunity, but with all opportunities come new responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I think that, if an athlete can approach it with the right mindset, the right support, I think it's a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, no, I agree that that's key because I've asked that question a lot on the show, and people that I've talked to some guys that played back when they would have loved to have that opportunity, and I think the biggest concern that's out there is the education side of it because a lot of these athletes and I always say young athletes, but I mean it could be young anybody because they're new to the world and all of a sudden getting a windfall of money. It could be somebody that's an actor, right, or any other thing where they get a lot of money, but just knowing that, hey, you got to pay taxes, you got to do different things with it, and just doing that, which I guess to your point, which is great at Portland State, you're talking about, they're starting to get into that. I think the NCAA, most schools are probably looking at that as well.
Yeah, I think that you also, I mean, when you think about it, it's like when I think about the time that I had available to me as a Division One athlete. You have you have the weight room in the morning, you got training in the afternoon, then you got study room, and then you have your classes. You know, and then I also can look back and say, man, I didn't do enough in the sport. Right, I didn't do enough studying of our plays. I didn't do enough studying of film. I didn't do enough. Right, and then when you throw in, okay, now you're going to be a business person too. Like you really have. I think I would assume that you'd have to have things really, really structured and buttoned up, so that you don't suffer in the sport, you don't suffer in the classroom, and you don't suffer because you're, kind of halfway doing this NIL thing and other things fall through the cracks.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, and obviously the athlete and the coaches too, they want to make sure
Hmm.
you're concentrating on your sport. So um talk a little bit about alumni interaction. So and we'll do twofold again. So we'll
Hmm.
do when you were at school and then how it is today. But was there interaction where alumni were coming back and kind of working with the athletes, whether they be just athlete alumni or just alumni in general?
Mm, not really. No, not by design. I would say that there were scenarios where there were former players that would still show up and play, like open gym and things like that, and that kind of connection, that kind of relationship, right? Like player to player,
Right.
open run, familiarity. But in terms of like development, no, not in terms of developing you as a player, developing you as a student, and developing you as a person who's prepared to step into the next phases of life. Like none of that was really established when I was a player.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you, it's interesting. One of the things, couple stories. Like one was, I talked to one guy, and what we're trying to do with Alumni Direct within our community centers is have an athletes corner, giving an opportunity for athletes to, current athletes to promote themselves as well as alumni athlete. But I was talking to one guy and a real tough transition out of sports, and he said that I asked him, I said, if you had a place where you could tap into alumni and potentially get a job because you got an alumni that's a CEO, and it doesn't have to be an athlete alumni, it could be any alumni for that matter, or other athletes, people that could help you and invest and mentor and things like that. Would it help? And he said honestly that would have changed the trajectory of his life. Yeah, which is pretty impactful because I think it's alumni can certainly play a key role in helping out in these situations. And there was another one where I was talking to an agent, and she said that they're trying to get their players in front of alumni. And a lot of times when you go to schools, they don't necessarily share that information, and they have different reasons for it. But they were happy to hear of that whole the fact of being able to go to a community, a college community, to tap into that alumni to help out their athletes.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that that would have helped me as well. I had 17 jobs in 11 years
Wow.
after leaving school, right? So, I think I would have needed some help just to say, hey, what opportunities should I be saying yes to, and which ones shouldn't I be saying yes to?
Yeah.
But I had to learn a lot of that just kind of the school of the hard knocks.
Yeah, no, I,
Yeah.
I can imagine. So, talk a little bit about and I know you do a great job of this, but networking and connecting and kind of utilizing that alumni network, so to speak, of like in your case with other Portland State alumni. Do you have an opportunity to do that, or is there a people doing that out there from the school?
From a currently or back
From a current
perspective?
perspective, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. From a current standpoint, I think that they're getting better about, creating opportunities for alumni to come back in and connect, and make connections happen. I think one of the things that I think as a society we do a better job of is positioning athletes with the proper mind frame. Right now, when you're a student athlete and you're a Division One athlete, you kind of think you're kind of cool, right? And
Yeah,
so you're expecting people to want to connect with you, right? You're expecting these mentors or these boosters or these, people on campus to, kind of cater to you,
yeah,
right? And I think that the proper mindset is to flip that around, right? Like your opportunity as an athlete, I believe, is to serve and to create impact and to create relationships and to be in the driver's seat, as it relates to creating, relationships. And so there is an opportunity to connect with alumni, with my current alma mater. But I think that, maybe because of where we are today in our world, I think sometimes athletes kind of take it for granted because
yeah,
we really don't realize that this opportunity is finite. I mean, it's
yeah.
4 years, 5 years. You're only important for about these 5 years. And then after that, it's not that you're not important. It's
Right.
just that it it's a your world changes, right? And so yeah, I think as a student athlete, there's opportunities for it, but I think student athletes need to take more ownership of building positive relationships with everyone on campus, including alumni.
Yeah, I agree. I was talking to another agent, and they said the best time for an athlete to network and connect is when they're playing. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, to your point, you're not. A lot of people aren't really thinking about that. I mean, they're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about their sport and playing, and not about looking ahead to that. I mean, one guy, I was talking to a college basketball coach, and he said that he talks to his players all the time. He just says, "Listen, you know what? Like, was it uh, a tenth of a percent?" Something like that, like 0.1% of people go beyond college and play professionally. And even then, it's a short live. And you got 20, 30, 40 years of working after that. So you need to be doing all these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you really do. You kind of have to see the vision for that too, and just know that, hey, there's a bigger plan, and your sport plan could be pretty big, but you can build a life plan that's much bigger than that. And if you can see that plan beyond just the sport, then I think it'll help you identify the importance of making those connections happen and treating them very seriously.
So sorry for the audience out there. We got a little dog barking, but
Hey, I think he's saying, he's like, man, that he's spot on.
it's like, yeah, it's like, way to go, Keith. You got this one nailed down. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the transition out of sport.
Yeah. So the transition out of sport really came, abruptly, right? Like I was done playing and like it just everything was silent, right? It was like, okay, now I gotta find a job, I guess. Like there's no exit interviews with, coaches or staff or academic advisors or anything like that. It just everything kind of stops. And then, you just go out and try to figure out what you're going to do. And so I had taken some leads from my girlfriend at the time who thought it'd be a good idea for me to be a loan officer. So she met some person at a networking event while we were out on a basketball trip and thought I should connect with them. And man, I went into that opportunity not really knowing what questions to ask. 5, 6 months into it, I recognized that, man, there's some serious core value issues that I have with working where I'm working at because people are filling out paperwork for customers. And there's like, the right before the mortgage crisis where, people were getting loans without any documentation or any pay stubs or anything like that. And so I went into the opportunity, wrong opportunity, went to the next opportunity, wrong opportunity. So I literally on average stayed at jobs for the over the course of a decade for probably on average of 6 months. And I had a couple of jobs that were, I'd been there for a couple of years, but for the majority of the time, I was very frustrated. I was very upset. I was bitter. I was, I was hurt. I think because, gosh, man, I'd done everything I on paper thought I was supposed to be doing, and here I am, struggling, right? Struggling to figure out. And I'm not from Portland, so I came up from Fresno, California. I didn't want to go back home because of what potentially that would have meant, right? I would have been in a environment that might have not supported any future success. So I decided that I stick around in Portland. I didn't know how to network. I didn't know how to really build a career plan. I didn't know how to set goals per se professionally. And so I had to figure all that stuff out on the fly over the course of a decade.
Yeah, that's definitely got to be tough. So, going through that long process, is there any like key nugget of advice that you would give athletes in when they're looking at that next step in their life?
Yeah, I think some of it, if I were to give them a bunch of advice right now, it'd probably be pretty overwhelming. But, first and foremost, I'd say, get very specific and clear about what your core values are, and how you want to live your life, right? Had I known what my core values were, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of parties I wouldn't have showed up to. There's plenty of people I wouldn't have been hanging out with, that I could have invested that time somewhere else more wisely into something that could set me up 5 years after I'm done playing, right?
Right,
So some specificity around core values. Number two is specificity around, like, what is it that I actually want from the sport? Like, what am I really after, and what is it going to take for me to achieve it? I didn't have the career that I wanted to have at Portland State University, and I think it was because I got recruited to do things that I didn't see as a vision for me as a player. And sort of there was this divide between me and my coaches, right? Had I known in specifics what it is that I wanted to accomplish in terms of from the sport, what kind of role did I feel like I should be playing on a team, I could have made the decisions to either get on the same page with the coaches or transfer, right?
right.
But because I didn't have the specificity, I couldn't make the decisions that I really needed to make at the time to figure out how to get closer to where what the actual goal is. And so, you know, the core values, the specificity around what do I want from the sport, and then at the end of the day, we all realize that we're not going to be doing this sport for the rest of our life. So, what is the overarching, like, purpose of my life, and what am I trying to accomplish? Right? What are the principles I'm going to live by? What am I good at? What are the relationships that I'm fighting for? Who wins when I win? Who loses when I lose? All of those things play into an overarching plan for my life and how I want things to go. And so if I understand what that is, then how can I think about that larger story and make an impact on every single person that comes into my path as a player, right? Instead of it just being about what am I getting with my scholarship and my NIL deal and what's in it for me, how can I, yes, answer those questions, but also how can I maximize the impact on that so that when I step into class and I meet my teacher, I'm having deeper, real conversations with my teacher, which if I do that, they'll go the extra mile to help me make sure that I achieve my education goals, right? I'm having deeper conversations with my coach because I'm in specificity communicating with them about what it is that I want. And I can recognize that they have goals too as a coach. And I can choose to be a part of helping them get where they want to go. So they will in turn help me get where I want to go. Or we can decide if it's not the right relationship, right? In addition to that, if I'm meeting with boosters or other people that are tangential to the my sports career, I'm having those same kind of conversations. So having that overarching plan in terms of my life, my sport, and then what my core values are, the things that I'm not going to violate. I think that having that mindset and that frame of reference as it relates to what am I doing here at this college or on this team would have helped me have a tremendous experience as a player and just as an individual.
Yeah, I mean that's a great talk there, and I'm sure like everything that you're telling now, like if you're like when you were younger, if you had what you're saying now, would have
Mhm,
made a total difference. And it's interesting. One of the guests I had on the show, what they've done is they've kind of taken an approach in high school of counseling the players to find the best school and program for them. So
mhm,
it's not just about, hey, I want to play football at Notre Dame or basketball at Portland State, UCLA, whatever, but
mhm,
where can that athlete go that not only they're playing their sport, but they're doing the right major that they want to have, and
mhm,
knowing that, okay, I got to look at the big picture plan. That back to what the theme we've been talking about is that
mhm,
it's short lived, unfortunately,
mhm,
after college, and even if you are fortunate to play professional. So have that big picture. And I think if it is ingrained at that younger level in high school, and then that, we talked about earlier in college, to have these programs to help these athletes out would be, tremendous. It make a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that 100%. I think it's really critical.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
fast forward now, I always talk about the beginning. I kind of
hmm
hit it real at the high level of what you do, but
hmm
tell us about what you're doing today and how to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm doing today is I have a couple different businesses I run. For the past 6 years, I've helped companies manage credit card fees for Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Discover, helping them sort through all the different, providers that are out there to make sure that they get the best support, the best technology, and the best price. So I've done that, but there's always been a desire of mine to go back and help the person, the prototype, the kid who I was coming out of college, to really find the right opportunities. So I started a company called Catalyst Training and Development. And what we do is we help student athletes figure out who they are, what they want, how to get it. Starting at the core value level, figuring out what are your core values, what is your purpose, and then what is your profession, right? How are we going to help you navigate life beyond the sport? And for someone like me coming out of college, my overarching bigger plan was for me to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't really to go get a job, right? And so, being that I've gone through that transition professionally as well, being able to help athletes transition into entrepreneurship, and find the right quality opportunities to do so, we actually help them with that in that regard. Or if they want to go down the executive route and work within a company, we can help them do that too.
So you're working with is it just college athletes, or you're working with professional athletes as well, that depending on where they're at?
Yeah, it depends on where they're at. So we can help them from the high school level, collegiate, or professional level.
Okay. And obviously it's nowadays everything's national. So I mean you can,
Yeah.
through the internet and all that, you can
Yep.
get with people in different states.
hmm Yep.
That's great. And so, and then also talk a little bit about, we briefly touched on it. Tell us a little about your podcast.
Yeah. So I have a podcast called The Athlete's Journey where we interview athletes that have transitioned successfully into life after sports. And so I've had anywhere from, professional NFL players who are now entrepreneurs to videographer, like pro soccer players who now run video production companies, to, just a variety of different uh, players that former players who are doing really well. My goal there is to really extract the principles that we've all learned from going through this transition, right? Like everyone's transition is for sure tough, but everyone came through it with different lessons. And so if we can, allow players to come on and tell their story, that's the purpose of that podcast. The second podcast that I'm really excited about is called Purpose. So at Catalyst, we call it the Catalyst Way. Um, there's a whole process that we go through with helping people find their purpose. And on that podcast, we interview, entrepreneurs, athletes, individuals that have gone through various, points of adversity and difficulty that they've come through and have, you know, we basically extract again those lessons that they learn through that process and teach it to, you know, student athletes, individuals, and entrepreneurs.
That's great. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm ready. I want to listen to both of them. That's the one thing I talk about too, is that, every day when I go for a walk or you go for a run, it's there's so much content out there, and just,
hmm
yeah, great podcasts. And then so where do they, where can they find you, like as far as your, your different,
Yeah.
where your website is and all that?
Sure. Yeah. So my primary website is keithsconiers.com. That's also my handle on Instagram. So it's just the @ Keith Sconiers, Sconiers. And from there, they can get anywhere, whether it be to my payments company, my consulting company as well.
That's good. Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
so we, definitely got to reach out on that stuff. Everybody look Keith up, and with these different companies. I mean, a lot of great things that he's doing. With Alumni Direct, you can find us at alumnidirect.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Facebook, and follow the show on YouTube. I think there's a lot of good we can do. I mean, as a company, we really want to make an impact in this. It's such a, the more people I talk to, it's a major issue, and having guests like yourself is awesome because you've gone through that journey, and so anything that we can do to help would be great. So thank you everybody very much, and we'll see you on the next show.